Hi, and thanks for tuning in. I wanted to remind you of our Road to 1,000 subscribers giveaway that we have going on our YouTube channel. If you subscribe and have a public profile, you'll be entered to win a free RX Smart Gear original jump rope. You'll get to pick the pattern of the handles, the color and weight of the cable, and you'll be getting one of the best-selling, best-performing jump ropes out there. Every time we hit a new century mark with the number of subscribers to our channel, we'll randomly select a new winner. And our friend Dave Newman is going to throw in a little something extra for each winner. So a special thanks to our sponsor, RX Smart Gear, to Dave Newman for being such a great partner, and to you for being a loyal listener. Good luck, and I hope you are our next winner.
And we're good.
All right. So these are my co-hosts, Kat Shear and Amy Radowski. And they are the friends of the Clydesdale and friends.
Friends.
And you're the Clydesdale.
I am the Clydesdale.
I am the Clydesdale. It sounds like, I don't know. It sounds like someone entering a room. I am the Clydesdale.
Yeah.
Good entrance.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or like a world wrestling.
When you're my size, you're just used to that. Like you come in big.
Yeah. I love the Eddie Van Halen in the background there.
Yep. In memory of.
Yeah, man, that's crazy. Yeah, I remember like contemplating. I had like a crappy, this like cheap guitar, and I like considered like, taping it up and painting it at one point. I'm not like Van Halen isn't like my favorite band by any stretch, but like I really appreciate them. And so I was like, oh, it's like his guitar is just so iconic. I was like, maybe I'll do that because it's just like a cheap guitar anyway, but never got around to it. Anyway, I'll let you go.
Do you play guitar?
Yeah, you play guitar, right?
Yeah, yep, I do. I don't really make the time for it anymore. I can still play. It's not something you like lose. You definitely get a little worse. Get a little rusty, and the fingers get like really stiff easily, and the calluses aren't built up there anymore. But yeah, I played guitar. I mean, there was a time in my life when I was like, 16 to 19, where at times I felt more, of a guitar player than an athlete. Like that was something I was really, really passionate about. I suppose I spent more of my free time, like when I was training as a athlete, whether it was volleyball or swimming, I was 100% focused. But like when I wasn't on the, in the pool or on the floor, all my spare time was like reading about guitars and, buying magazines and learning songs and just like playing or doing homework. I didn't really like associate like the fact that I could like do more to be better at sports, like outside of just like the regular practices. I did, if someone gave me something, like if a coach said like, hey, do these sets and reps in the gym, or do these, this jumping program, I'd do it. But I didn't like understand like, oh, you could like stretch, or you could like, just do more. So that more time for me was usually spent like with music and playing my guitar.
So did you find that playing the guitar like centered you, like as a way to balance kind of all those things?
I just really enjoyed it. I think like looking back, I think there was like a time where I kind of liked this idea, not that I knew the expression at the time, but like Renaissance man. The Renaissance man is like a guy who can like, is like an athlete and a musician and a scholar and all those types of things. And so I think like without knowing that term, I think I learned that term for the first time when I was like 22, but I just like that idea of just kind of being multifaceted. Whereas now I'm pretty one-dimensional with my fitness. I joke with some people that sometimes that I probably, I'm getting more dumber. Because I'm just like not reading as much, and I'm not, I still have my accounting degree, but I'm not like actively practicing. So those kind of chops are getting a little looser, but, just with all things, there's a season, and the music will come back, as will the scholarly pursuits one day.
So here's my last guitar question. I played up until I started CrossFit, and I tried to play probably for the first year I was CrossFitting 5 days a week. My fingers got so banged up from CrossFit that it actually started to hurt to play guitar. Now, maybe I'm just bad at CrossFit. Maybe that's the key to it. But CrossFit actually made my guitar playing decrease tremendously.
Yeah. I mean, there's probably part of that. I mean, if you're training CrossFit, it's like a high intensity, pursuit. Right. And so, it's hard to, add on anything else that's like physically and sometimes even mentally demanding. I know someone Rob Forte would coach some athletes in like motocross. and he would bring them into the CrossFit gym and they do some workouts to, improve their fitness. But he would stay away from anything in the CrossFit gym that was in any way grip intensive, because with motocross, he's like, they're already doing so much of this and they're holding the bike that like, we don't do toes to bar, we don't do touch and go cleans. Like you just try to like find ways to, keep them active, get them moving, but just like avoid anything that's like slightly resembles grip fatigue. And a lot of CrossFit is, double overhand grip. Like that's a huge, so it's like if that fatigues your fingers or your forearms or whatever that is, and then that's playing into something else, whether that's guitar maybe, or even, if you're working with your hands, like you're a mechanic or something, I could definitely see that like wouldn't be a good pairing potentially.
Well, we are 5 minutes in and we're already way off script, which is awesome.
Who cares? Who cares?
Yeah.
I want to know what's going on here. What's this?
Oh,
like
this is called lazy.
I like it.
Yeah, no, I grew my beard out a bit and had a mustache in December, and usually I'll just I'll grow up my facial hair a bit and then I trim it and I go, oh geez, like it's so much better trim. Like that's always, you kind of like, yeah, I don't mind this, I don't mind. And you trim it and you're like, oh, I look better. But this was the one time where I had the mustache and then I shaved it, and both me and my wife are kind of like, I kind of miss the mustache. We both do. So I might bring it back eventually. I don't really have any like, concrete plans for that, but it's not something I'm against maybe in the future. But yeah, right now this is just like, I don't know, a couple days of just
good.
me not
gives you
shaving.
an edge. My husband grows a goatee and I say it makes him look meaner because he's got like such a kind face. So it makes you a little edgy.
Yeah, I've got a little bit of a Wonder Bread kind of vibe. So it gives me a little something extra, a little bite, a little mustard on the Wonder Bread.
Well, if you are listening to this and you don't know who we're talking to, you apparently are new to CrossFit. We're talking to Brent Fikowski, several times, 6-time games athlete, a couple times podium. And and we're going to talk to him about like where he came from, what got him into CrossFit, and what his plans are for the upcoming season, plus all the stuff he has going on outside of CrossFit that's kind of associated with it. The first question I'm going to ask you, because it happened today, and you can decline to comment if you wish. There was a change at leadership today at CrossFit LLC.
Oh.
And Eric Roza stepped down.
Okay. Oh, I think I saw that. Did he step down? I think he changed roles.
Sidestepped. Yeah.
The letter said step down to become chairman of the board.
Right. Okay.
And they're looking for a new CEO.
Oh, cool.
And,
that's exciting.
Any comment?
I mean, it's kind of one of those things, really. It's like the same as the Dave Castro announcement, where it's like, well, let's kind of see what functionally that looks like in terms of how that affects, what you and I experience through the brand of CrossFit, right? Like we don't really know, obviously with Dave, there was a public perception, and it was pretty accurate, I think, that he had a large part of how like the CrossFit Games and even I think the training to a certain extent like functioned. So there's this like thought of, well, if he leaves, is that going to functionally change? And it will, I imagine, but how much, I don't really know. And I don't think anyone really knows, even the people there, like, are they going to just try to kind of replicate what Dave did? And I think that's possible. And so if they choose to say, you know what, we're just going to try and do what Dave did, kind of they're probably not going to replace Dave with like a person that's going to do all of Dave's roles. It's like, okay, well, we need to do the programming. We need to like build hype for the sport online. We need to announce the workouts. Like those are kind of some of the pieces of his job. And you can get a variety of different people and groups of people to do those roles. And if they just try to copy it, they probably could. Like, programming is very subjective, not objective. Like, you ask 100 people, how was the programming at this year's games? They're going to say 100 different things. Some people say it was great. Some people say it was good. And the ones that say it was bad are probably going to say it was bad for different reasons. So, I think like with Dave's, it was obviously big news because he's been like a huge, very visual forefront of the company, but, the company is larger than one person. And with Eric changing roles as well, will we see any like ripple effects in how CrossFit functions with Eric moving? Probably not. And I don't think it's a good or a bad thing. I don't really know. I mean, I hope the best for Eric. Like I like Eric. I've had some good conversations with him, and I hope it's the best for him and his family. And I'm sure CrossFit will do really well, and bring someone else in, or maybe someone else within the company will get promoted to that CEO role. But I'm sure Eric will still be like very involved. I don't know if that, I feel like that was a very political response. I didn't really say anything, but
Well,
I mean, it's like,
it just happened like 4 hours ago. So to get any kind of educated response, I just wanted to see if you had anything to say.
Yeah, no, I don't really. Yeah, I mean, CrossFit, CrossFit's going to live on, right? And it's a brand. It's rolling down a hill, right? And there's going to be things where you can kind of like push it in one direction or the other. But as we saw, like a huge thing that shaped what CrossFit is and will continue to is like COVID, and that's something that pushed it in a different direction that no one planned for. And then there'll be things that like as a company or as a group of people, like maybe me with the Athlete Association will try to steer it in a different direction. And that will inevitably probably lead it somewhere that we didn't even want it to go. You know what I mean? Like it's just it's rolling down a hill. There's a lot of momentum with CrossFit, and there will always be, I think. And individual people are going to play a role in that, but a lot of that's like, it's just kind of like spirit forces. It's a combination of a bunch of factors, and you ask 100 people like, what is CrossFit? And they're probably going to give you 100 different answers as well, because it's like transcended what any one person would like even attempt to define it as, if that makes sense. Like it's a really, it's a big thing, right?
Do you have any ties to CrossFit aside from the sport? Like, do you own an affiliate? Are you a coach? Have you taken your level 1? Like what sort of touch points aside from the sport do you have?
Yeah,
Obviously,
that's good.
It's
a good question. I don't own an affiliate. I actually don't really even attend an affiliate anymore just because of COVID. I have a gym in my backyard, which is not affiliated. and I have taken my level 1, but I think there's a 5-year cycle on that, right? So that's done. So I'm not officially a level 1, certified trainer at this exact moment. Not to say that I won't be again at some point. But I just don't coach any classes. And so, yeah, my only touch point is, I pay $20 for the open, then I pay $50 for quarterfinals, then I pay $250 to go to regionals, semifinals. Hopefully hopefully go somewhere, hopefully go somewhere, prize money there. And then I pay, $350 to go to the games. And, I call myself a CrossFit Games competitor. And, but yeah, so, other than that, that's about it, which is an interesting thing. Cause it's like, when people ask me like, I was at an appointment earlier today, I'm kind of moving around, I'm stretching a bit. I was sitting a lot this morning, and I have to sit a bunch this afternoon. So I'm kind of like in this couch stretch position here. And today they asked me like, oh, what's your job? And I still don't feel comfortable. I'm like, oh, I'm a professional athlete. And I kind of just like mumble it. And they're like, oh, cool. What do you do? I'm like, I do CrossFit competitions. And some people, it's always interesting, people's response to that. But it's because, it's interesting. I use that word to describe it, yet like there isn't really an actual, bond there, right? There's not like a contractual thing. But I suppose that's the same if you were a triathlete. You just go to these triathlon competitions and you sign up, and if you keep doing well, then but I guess if you make the Olympics, you can call yourself an Olympian, which actually has there's government funding for that. But anyway, a little bit of sidebar.
So you mentioned the association. So we'll just head in that direction now.
Sure.
You were part of the group that started the PFAA a few years ago. The initial kind of mission of that was to just athlete safety. That's what your initial focus was. Where are you at now with the association? And with the changes in leadership over time, have you gotten a better voice with CrossFit overall?
Yeah, it's we're still plugging along. Honestly, a lot of it I've been doing, and a group of us have been doing. Been kind of quiet about it, but we have been doing work. It's not a secret society, but I also don't want it to become like a political organization either. I've been asked to like comment on. Someone will reach out like, oh, like PFAA should make a statement on how they feel about this, and I'm like, well, I don't really feel comfortable like speaking on behalf of a group of athletes. Because it's like, I don't know how they feel. So it's not really my place, nor is it ever going to be the place of us to do that. So the idea is to get, we finalized some bylaws. We're going to get, I'm still working on kind of like reaching out to these athletes this week reelect our executive board, who will then, hope to kind of represent, a group of athletes, the higher level athletes, the ones that are competing at the games, the ones that are doing well at semifinals and events like that, and sort of be, hopefully a group that, competition organizers can reach out to, and we can reach out to them and give them our feedback, right? And hopefully, with our collective voice, they'll be interested in listening to our feedback, and then that can kind of trickle down and affect the other competitions, or the lower divisions as well, without having to have like a membership base of like 2,000 people with all these different divisions and membership and age groups, which just becomes like a lot of work for me. That's kind of, it'd be great to do that, but it's just more work than I can take on. And the communication has improved. We sent, I collected a bunch of data on the heights of athletes and their preferred heights for rings and pull-up bars, compiled that data, provided that data to Wadapalooza, and they changed their rings and pull-up bar heights from what they were the year before, which is like pretty cool. So, and then after the competition, I reached out to some of the taller athletes, some of the shorter athletes that were there, asked their experiences. And so I'm going to kind of do a little more of that, compile that information, and then reach out to all the semifinals that I can get a hold of, and kind of just like talk to them about that, because I don't think that should be a part of the sport that's like an unknown element, right? It's like, we know we're going to be doing muscle ups either on bar or rings, like it's going to be there, right? We're going to probably do chest bars and toes to bar. Like that's not a surprise anymore. That's not and everyone should be able to do them without hitting their feet on the ground, but also do them without having to jump like 2.5 feet and like not, there's a story of a shorter athlete who had to put a heavy vest or a backpack or something on at a competition, had to jump up with one hand to the ring, swing, grab the other one, and start the ring muscle ups. And when you're trying to be the best in the world, and this is a really high level athlete, it's like you're trying to win thousands of dollars to pay for your entire year of training. Like that extra few seconds and that expended energy to do that, it's like, oh, like you will not win that workout. Best you can do is fifth. And then it just like, you just like cut that off. And for someone taller like myself, or more aptly, Matt Dlugos, he trains in Vegas. He's very tall. He's like 6'3", 6'4". It's like, if he goes to a competition and there's a workout with chest to bars and his feet are dragging on the ground, it's like, oh, like best case, you're coming 15th in that workout. Like you can't win that workout if your feet are dragging. And that's just not really, it's not really fair. So I think there's been improvement there. Like that's just a concrete example of some improvement. And we worked on like a list of equipment that, because it's been frustrating as an athlete where you'll go to a competition and you're like not really sure what you're allowed to use or not use. So like an example of that is, you go to a competition and you say like, well, like, can I wear this weight belt? Or, can I wear knee wraps or knee sleeves? And what does that look like? And so like I was at a competition once where they had this like internal document that I wasn't aware of that said you couldn't wear knee wraps. And I'm like, well, why not? Well, you can't wear it, like it's here. Okay. So then I didn't wear knee wraps. But then in that same document, it listed like 4-inch weight belts were okay, but nothing over 4-inch. And then I see someone wearing a 5-inch weight belt. And I go, well, so you're going to enforce the knee wraps, but not the weight belt. And I only have a 4-inch weight belt. So why don't I bring a 6-inch weight belt, which is more beneficial? It's going to cover more surface area. So it's like, we need to have rules, and we talk about professionalizing the sport. And when you talk about that, a lot of people talk about money, which, don't get me wrong, like that's going to be a piece of the puzzle. But until you have like a equitable, fair playing field and some safety as well tied into that, how can you, the money doesn't mean anything if the placings don't mean anything. And if there's no like consistency, then it's like, where do you even start? Like, I started this sport, and for the first 3-4 years, I didn't make any money, and I did it because I loved it. And so I think there's always going to be a group of people that are always going to be in that boat. And it's like, I want to make sure that those people are competing on a playing field that is consistent and fair. And, if they're the 8th best person at a competition, they should come 8th, not 9th and not 7th. Anyway, a lot going on there, but
I actually talked to Matt on the podcast the day the ruling came down about the bar height and the ring height. And he was telling me that, yeah, it's an equitable thing, but it's also a safety thing for him to do the ring muscle ups on the lower rings. He actually has to put his body in an awkward position to complete the muscle up. And he risks injury every time he does that.
Yeah. You're talking about Matt DeLugos?
Yeah, Matt DeLugos.
DeLugos. Yeah, I've actually was just texting him 2 days ago, but I don't know how to pronounce his last name. So full disclosure. Yeah, nice guy.
I wonder too if there's a way to get with with Rogue or the people that are manufacturing the equipment, because I imagine that one of the biggest limitations of having to accommodate that size is the ability to sort of move the bar, move the rig, move the rings in a way that's quick and easy in between, heats and things like that with logistics of the competition. Is anyone talking to Rogue to sort of figure out how they can make equipment that's a little more modular to help in that regard?
Yeah, it's on my list to get in touch with them. Like some of the athletes in the PFAA are, sponsored by Rogue, so the communication channel there is pretty easy. It's on the list there. Obviously, not every single competition. Most of them are Rogue competitions. Not every single one. I think some of the semis last year, maybe the event in South Africa, for example, I don't think they had a Rogue equipment. So it kind of has to start with the competition organizer and at least an awareness around that. But you are right. I mean, in an ideal world, you'd have like a pull-up bar that was on I think in the sort of long document I posted, I mentioned in an ideal world, you would be able to adjust it electronically. So as soon as the heat was done, you type in I want it to be at 94 inches, and it would just kind of be there. That's I'm not saying we're ever going to even get there, but it's kind of important to start at the ideal and then work your way back to the realistic. If nothing else, although it is somewhat cost prohibitive, the best option is set the rings and set the pull-up bar at the height for the tallest athlete that's at the competition, keep them there, and then allow for mats to be stacked underneath. And right now they call them risers, which are usually 6 inches, and I believe they are 20 by 20 inches. Ideally, those would just be much larger. So they'd be 4 feet by 6 feet, which is extreme, but then that you can stack them, maybe even 18 inches high, so that, a very short athlete could use the same rings, which have the same strap length, because shorter strap lengths are advantageous. So if you have everyone has the same strap length, no one has to jump. And then if the shorter athlete's doing their ring muscle ups and they kind of slip or they jump down, then they have this large mat to fall on, as opposed to, a tall, skinny block. And then they're hitting their feet on that, their feet kick
hurting
up.
Their ankle.
Rolling their ankle, or, their feet slip up and then their head's hitting the floor instead of them just kind of landing on. If I slipped and fell on a set of rings, it's I know I'm just going to kind of land on my mid back, which, it's on a Dollimer mat, that's fine. But if I hit my feet first and then it's then your head's hitting the ground. So simply, it's I think one of the simpler solutions is just providing larger surface area risers, and have the athletes use those. So that's just one area. And then just in general, the PFAA, the communication has improved a lot. We started it in kind of around the that whole area of time there, May, June of 2020. And yeah, communication has definitely improved. It's just kind of slowly gotten better. And it's tough. I really want to keep pushing forward and improving. And I'm really starting to feel that there's a desire for that within the athletes and within CrossFit Inc. and other competitions. There's this hunger to make things perfect and make things better, even if everyone's definition of better and perfect isn't the same. But I also have to remember that that takes time, right? It's there's these habits and there's these methods that how things have been done for many, many years. And if we look back at, 2 years ago, let's say the start of 2020, I mean, there was zero communication between, competitions and athletes, zero, right? I mean, someone you could probably ask someone who'd been doing it. I mean, at that point, I've been doing it for, 8 years, but, I'd never provided any feedback or been asked for any feedback or knew of any athlete of my caliber or higher than my caliber that had ever been asked for feedback or provided feedback to a competition on what they should be doing better or worse. It just didn't, those channels of communication just did not exist. And we're not, I mean, I think there was a desire for the athletes for some of that, for their voice to kind of be heard and to, provide some insights and, ask for changes, whether it be for a fairness or a safety concern, but there wasn't really that interest from competitions. And I'm not just saying that from like CrossFit Inc. regionals and the games. I'm talking like, every other competition as well. It's just that's just how things were done. But that seems to be changing. And so it's still going to take time. And hopefully the PFAA will be part of that. It doesn't have to be, but right now we're kind of organizing in a way that I think it, could provide that service, which is exciting.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think as I examine the landscape of CrossFit, I think the athletes and coaches are the two groups that don't really have a voice in CrossFit overall. And I think for years there was a fear factor with a lot of that people were afraid to speak out in fear of retaliation. And that's my opinion. That is not Brent's opinion. I'm just voicing.
That's my opinion too. That's not something I don't think I've ever said that before, but that's something that not a lot of people understand. I'll read comments, which is always a mistake. But if I ever do, people say, well, why don't they say this? And I'm like, there's a fear factor, right? Because there was a fear that if you, spoke out against something you didn't like, that there would be negative repercussions for your career. So I'm trying to think of without naming names. So let's say I know of an example where a competition within the last 2 years, so as things have been changing for the better, competition reached out to a coach, and well-respected coach that had athletes that were games athletes and regional athletes, like a stable of athletes. And they asked that coach, how did you find our competition? Do you have any suggestions? And I'd love to hear your feedback. And the coach sat on it for a bit, a week, and then said, no, like nothing really, like it was great. Looking forward to doing it again. And I spoke to that coach, and they told me that story. And they said, because I was afraid that if I actually spoke my mind and said, even if it was constructive criticism with like very, distinct, like, these are some things I didn't love, these are some I loved, and the things that I didn't love, this is how I personally would change it, and these are the reasons. They were like, you know what? It was a risk that if I did that, I might be, my athletes might not be treated fairly the next time they compete. And so I just kept my mouth shut. And that's something that's a true story. And that's something very common amongst athletes and coaches that I've heard and felt that throughout the years. And so it seems like that is, I feel like that is changing personally, which is not something I ever thought I'd be able to say, but I feel like that is very changing. I feel a lot safer and more open to just even mention that on a podcast, and also to actually talk to owners of competitions and speak to them quite frankly, and just tell them to it straight. Tell it to them straight. That's what I was trying to say. So yeah, it's positive change. But it's going to take time, right? Like you're not going to see, and I think part of it too is like one of the things when we talk about safety, you mentioned that, and I've had a difficult time quantifying safety without it bleeding into athletes influencing programming. So that's something that's going to take more time, because right now there are really no rules as to what is and what is not good programming, whether you're looking at good from a efficacy of like, is this fitness, is this safe, is this fair? Those are kind of some buckets you could put programming into. Is it a well-rounded test of fitness? You hear that term, well-rounded, whatever that, that can mean a number of things. And so because there are no rules specifically defining that, I might say, I think that doing a workout with, 300 deadlifts for time is unsafe, right? But there would be some people that would say it's not, you just need to be better. So when you talk about safety and improving the safety at competitions, so much of it, like 90% of it is loop. It's all comes back to programming. And so until there is some interest in, accepting some guidelines and some form of parameters that define what is and what is not programming, like acceptable programming, then it's really hard to broach that subject. So I've been focusing, and the PFAA is going to focus the first few months and even maybe year. A lot of the safety stuff probably won't get addressed, because so much of it comes back to programming, and that's like a really subjective subject at the moment until we can create very specific objective criteria for them to follow. Start with And by they, I mean any competition. And I get it. If I was organizing a competition, the programming is the most fun part. Everything else is boring. It's hard work. It's logistics. It's like organizing people. But then you get to write these cool workouts. And the last thing you want to do is have someone come in and say like, that's too many burpees, or like you need more running. And you're just like, oh, screw you. Like these are cool. So it's good. That's going to take a really long time. Yeah, a bit rambly there.
No, that was perfect. So let's switch to some more fun stuff, right? You grew up in Canada, and on the western side, correct?
Yeah.
Was it a small town?
Yeah, Lethbridge, Alberta, which is like a city, a town of 100,000. So there's a university and a college there. Yeah.
And you did swimming and then volleyball were your focus, but you did other sports as well.
Yeah. So growing up, just like, it's cold in Canada. So most of the sports I would call like indoor sports. But, badminton and track and field and, some taekwondo when I was younger, some t-ball, a little bit of soccer, and just kind of like parents threw me in a little bit of everything and just kind of waiting to see what stuck. And I did guitar lessons. My sister played piano and, I played basketball and then kind of just found a love for volleyball. I was taller as well. Like I was, 6 foot by the time I was in grade, 8 or 9. So it was like, was tall, young. And so it's like, well, maybe try basketball or volleyball. And basketball just didn't really stick. I know now why. At the time, I didn't really know why. But and then volleyball, yeah, was lucky to have like really, really good coaching in Lethbridge. There's really good volleyball coaches there, really great community. And then, yeah, just like kind of fell in love with that. And then swimming was always a mainstay where every summer we would swim, like we call it summer club. And it was kind of like a 3.5, 4-month season of swimming. And so then in the winter, we'd play winter sports. And in the summer, we'd do this like local kind of swimming circuit. And so swimming was just always like the off season, or I guess you'd call it the off season because you do all this other stuff and then swimming. Yeah. And that was pretty much my, grades from grade 1 to 12, I was swimming every summer.
How did that prepare you for your career in CrossFit?
Yeah. I mean, obviously there's like the physical attributes of that. Like swimming, there's like a muscle endurance component to that. And, the aerobic capacity of that. And then volleyball, the like repeated power output, right? So, learned how to do Olympic lifts within the first couple of months. They were technically pretty solid because if you look at something like a push press, very similar to a block, right? You're jumping, you're starting here, you're exploding up with like a partial knee bend, and you're pressing the arms over your head. It's like I think I could split jerk 300 pounds before I could back squat it. Just from like a technical standpoint, it was just a movement that came very naturally. The same with a power clean, like a power clean or power snatch is going to be very similar to an approach where you have your arms down here and you come up, and that's, very similar motion. But I think more than that, something that it helped me with is I feel like I'm a good competitor, right? Like I think probably from, grade 6 to grade 12, probably every second weekend I was competing, right? Whether it was a swim meet or a volleyball, tournament. And so just got very used to, packing food and going to driving somewhere and competing. And, that's a skill like anything else. And so, I probably put in my, 1,000 hours of actually competing, which I think is why, I consistently can show up and, perform at a high level, especially at the in-person events. And I think that that's something that's kind of set me apart. And I had really good swimming coaches and volleyball coaches where we worked a lot on the mental game of things. Like we would visualize our swimming races to a point where you could get within, a second or two of your time by just like closing your eyes and doing the race in your head. And, volleyball, we would have 2 or 3 times a week, we'd have like these classroom sessions like before or after training where we'd go through game film and we'd talk about strategy, and we kind of do these like visualization sessions of, performing and winning. And we spoke a lot about like, what we defined as success. And that's not just like winning games, but like performing at our best and, performing at your best when your best matters. And so, in a lot of ways, my mindset was probably at its peak then. And I've just been trying to kind of sustain that. And I'll kind of have these troughs where I'll slip into bad habits and get stressed and, start focusing on the wrong thing, start focusing on the outcome instead of, getting back to the original tenets that sort of, allowed me to succeed back then. And usually when I'm like really dialed in on those things and focusing less on the leaderboard is what we call it in CrossFit, but the scoreboard and every other sport is when I actually perform at my best. So, obviously there's those physical elements, and I think the swimming and the volleyball translated pretty well to a good start in CrossFit from like, the physical attributes. But I think the sort of the intangibles, like the ability to compete and, the mental side of just like showing up to training every day, not because you were motivated, but because it was just a non-negotiable, right? It's just a non-negotiable part of life, is that you wake up and you train, and then you go do your job, or you go to work, or you go to school, and then you go after school, you go train again. And that's just like what you do. And that's when you're there, you give it 100%. You do exactly what your coach tells you. And then when it's time to compete, you do exactly what your coach tells you. And if you're good enough, you'll win. So, yeah.
So you said that trained you a lot for in-person competition. How were you doing with your mindset during COVID CrossFit, where you didn't get to compete in person, but you had to do everything online?
Yeah, I framed it. My wife helped me, and we framed it into a positive, where it's like, hey, like historically, and this isn't to say I mentioned the in-person competing. I personally believe that I perform very well at home, but just relative to my peers, it seems like I don't perform as well. So whether they aren't performing as well in person, or I think it's a combination of things. There's some attributes to competing at an online event relative to an in-person event, just with the logistics, like how many workouts you're doing, the types of movements in those workouts, the duration of those workouts, how those workouts are programmed. I mean, if you look at a lot of workouts in like the Open or something, you would just never see that specific workout at the CrossFit Games. Like, it just wouldn't really make sense. Like, you wouldn't see 150 dumbbell snatches at 50 pounds at the games. Like, you just wouldn't want to watch that. It'd be 100-pound dumbbell for 50 reps, or it'd be, it'd be different. So there's different elements there. But as far as getting back to the original question, it was challenging because like I enjoy competing, like I train a lot, I train really hard. I say no to a lot of things every week so I can just focus on training and getting good sleep. And so when that kind of end goal of competing is sort of taken away from you, and it just turns into like, oh, you're in your gym again, but you just have to send us videos, and hopefully, you're fast enough and you can, that was hard. And then the actual act of competing online was a little, it's frustrating because I know that it doesn't favor me as much. And I feel like when I think of what the sport is, I don't think of it as something you do in your gym. I think of it as something you train for in your gym, and then you go to a stadium and you compete. Like, that's how I view the sport. And so, but, my wife helped me reframe it, and she said, wouldn't have it any other way, right? It's a great opportunity for you to, try to make it through this, in the case of last year, make it through an online semifinal, prove to yourself that, you can make it through this situation that isn't ideal. And then, and then you'll be that much more prepared. If you made it through that, then you'll be ready for the games, because you can make it through that with these really good athletes, the online competition, and you get to the games, you'll be fine. And so, was able to reframe it that way, but still, was still realistic, and it was still frustrating, a little annoying. But
So have you always done the Open from your home then?
No, I usually used to do the Open at CrossFit gyms.
Okay.
But just with COVID and, the gym here has enough space and stuff. And then I think even, I think for last year, I can't quite remember, but I feel like, the logistics of me going to a gym that was a CrossFit affiliate and setting myself up for an open workout, like I think there were still some restrictions in place as far as like, masks and high intensity and like space per person. So I would have to come in at like a weird time in between classes. And then some of them weren't affiliated anymore. So I'm like, well, I'm going to have to submit a video anyway.
Sure.
Or what it was is, and so then another one of the affiliates that it's like, okay, it's still a CrossFit affiliate. I can go in there. They kind of moved their space around. So there wasn't as much floor space. So I'm like, oh, if I have to do walking lunges, like there's nowhere to do it, because they like built a rig in the middle. Like there's not a big open space anymore. it's all these little like compartments with these racks and rigs. So I'm like, well, if I have to do walking lunges, like I can't even do them in that gym anyway. So I'm going to have to submit a video from this other gym. So I might as well just do it at home. So yeah, it's a whole thing.
You mentioned Claire helping you reframe everything. She is a native Australian. And at some point during your college career, you moved to Australia. Is that how you guys met?
Yeah, that's correct. So I went to the Lethbridge College, and then I was finishing my degree as an accountant. I was going to go to a university in Alberta, and decided, my best friend and I were like, you know what, instead of doing that, let's finish it in Australia. So we transferred there. We saved up some money for a year, and then we finished our degree in Australia, played some beach volleyball. It's where I found CrossFit. Wasn't planning on finding CrossFit there, but it happened, and found my wife as well. Not like we got married right away, but yeah, we met because my best friend was dating a girl who was really good friends with Claire, and so my best friend, and we went on this double date, and yeah, we've been together ever since. It's been let me think, 9.5 years now we've known each other. We've met. So
Is the best friend still with the girl?
No, but they're on good terms. No, they're on good. They both came to our wedding. They had other partners at the time, and they broke up when they left, and Claire and I didn't, and then she made her way here, and so yeah.
And so the really cool part of the story is because her family is in Australia, yours is in Canada, you eloped to an interesting place. What was that like?
Yeah, so we Claire moved here. We were living together, and then got engaged, and then we were going to get married. And so we decided to get eloped in Bali, in Indonesia, with just like 4 close friends with us, because it was kind of like, we're going to have the reception here, we're going to have the reception in Canada or in Australia, and either way, like a group of family was going to sort of be left out. So yeah, we eloped in Bali and had a great vacation, a great trip there with some friends. One of the few trips we've taken that didn't involve a CrossFit competition over the past like 8 years. And so that was really fun. And then we sort of had a little ceremony here in Canada where we had sort of like the first dance and kind of at this hall and had some drinks and stuff. And then we had a ceremony in Australia where we, her grandma baked a cake. She used to bake cakes, like she had a shop. So, baked a cake there, and we had like appetizers. And so Claire got to wear a dress 3 times, which is like, that's great. I got to wear my little tux 3 times. And yeah, we had a lot of fun. So that's kind of how we, a little unique, but that's how we got to do it. And everyone kind of got to be a part of something, part of the, the celebration over the course of like a month or 2. And yeah.
So you also started the Professor Project, an online programming with 3 different tracks. Why did you decide to do that? And what are your plans for that going forward?
Yeah, it's sort of changed over the years a little bit. It sort of started, I kind of wanted to do something different. Everyone was sort of offering programming, and I felt like maybe there was something else I could offer. And so I created, it was sort of a huge video library. They're all still there, 200-300 videos of just kind of deep diving into, competition strategy, prepping for events, movement technique stuff, mindset, and just trying to do that as sort of like a subscription service to, it's like, what's the subscription service where people get taught stuff? They call it the Academy or something. You know the one I'm talking about? Anyway, doesn't matter. So I did that, and then I realized people wanted programming, so I added programming too. I'm like, maybe there's a reason everyone's offering programming, because that's what people want. So now we offer programming where there's sort of like it's basically what I do every day. You can follow along with that, and then there's a shorter version of it, and then there's a just still because of COVID and limited equipment, then there's a very abbreviated, just like you have a dumbbell and a jump rope kind of just like at home workout, which my wife often chooses those workouts. She sort of hits those as I'm doing my training. And then there's still all the videos, and then there's just like a community and opportunity to, ask me questions and have a group of people, communicating with each other and like all trying to get better. And it's a lot of fun. Yeah. It's it's not something that I like really planned on doing, but now that I've like done it and it exists, I really enjoy, just like helping people learn. And like anything, you know, you get out of it what you put into it. And like a lot of people really like try to soak up all the content and soak up the videos and ask questions about them. And, you know, they're the ones that are usually, you know, improving the quickest. So it's a lot of fun.
I was an early adopter of your initial videos. I remember specifically your toes to bar and your burpee strategy for competition that I use over and over again when I coach classes. So it was super helpful.
Yeah, cool. That's good to hear. Yeah, it's fun. Like I hear that a lot with the rope climb video as well. And
that's a good
you know,
one.
I've just, and it's interesting. I actually I got a copy of, I sent a copy of Matt Fraser's book, and I've just sort of thumbed through it. And there's some interesting, you know, like Matt's not really like, you know, my brand is like the professor and like, you know, like analytical, and, you know, flipping through Matt's book, you know, his brand is more like, you know, just work hard, show up and just like work harder than anyone and it'll work out. But he has that, and I mean, I work my butt off too, but he has that analytical side as well, where, you know, I'm reading his like competition tips and tricks and little things he's done in competition and training to prepare for competition, and he kind of frames it a little differently. He calls it like the speed mindset, and I would just say, I'm like, oh well, that's just strategy. Like you're just maximizing the abilities you have instead of just saying like, well, I'm really fit, it'll work out if I just go out there and go hard. He's like, well, no, I need to like think about how I'm putting the plates onto the yoke so that I'm not wasting time, like, you know, doing 2 laps around the yoke when I could just be doing 1.5 half laps, like that kind of stuff. Which, you know, I pride myself on that. And, you know, hasn't been as public about that, or that's not as like attached to his brand, so to speak. But I think it's something that all the top level competitors do. Like, yeah, I've had conversations with Sarah about that. We were training leading up to Dubai in 2019. We were in a gym, and I kind of finished my training. So I was just like, you know, helping her set up for her next piece. She was testing one of the workouts, and, you know, the chalk bucket was up here. And I was like, she's like, yeah, you're right. So she puts it on the floor because she knows in competition, the chalk bucket's on the floor. And so it's just like she knew that. Like I was just about to tell her, and she's like, yeah, I know. So she puts it on the floor because it's like, well, if you want to practice this workout like you're going to be doing it in the competition, put the chalk bucket on the floor because that's where it's going to be. But leading up to the open, well, I always keep it right here. You know, I don't want to bend over like some commoner to my feet to chalk my hands. And so it's those little details, and like they don't really matter, but it's that constant like analyzing of like that chalk detail. Like it doesn't matter, right? If you always chalk by your hands and you go to competition, you chalk by your feet, it's like whatever. But if you're willing to do that, it shows the habitual act of like analyzing every little detail. And eventually, and that's kind of what I took from Matt's book, is it's like there's tips in there that, you know, aren't even going to help me, and they're probably not going to help anyone that reads them. But it's like, no, it's the understanding that, you know, if he's willing to like dive into all those little things, like when you go to some competition with some weird workout, you need to be thinking like, well, how is this going to play out? Like, what is every little single detail that could go wrong? How can I prep for that? And how can I like train so I'm like ready for that again? So it's that kind of try to
just like, yeah, just like you were saying that you were visualizing your swim meets, you know, like practicing those things, like it's like doing a run through, like a dry run, by having all those just like a comp. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And you've always been known as this like high level strategist. And that's how you got the name of the professor, right? Was there ever a moment where you had to like be able to turn that off in a competition and just let it rip? Or is that not how you do things?
That's a good question. I have tried that. There was a period where I sort of gave that a whirl, and, you know, it's important to, you know, we all have our, like that's a strong aspect of me, but that's also, you know, where all my weaknesses come from, right? Your strongest character traits are also where your weaknesses come from. And so, you know, I sometimes have a tough time falling asleep because I'm always thinking, like, for example, and it's like, well, if you want to have good sleeps, then, you know, it's going to help you recover. So it's like, you know, they're combating even though they're from the same root. And so I have tried kind of like shutting that off and just going like full primal. And there's like a sweet spot in there, and I can't go too far in that area. You know, like in that analyzation, I don't think that was a word, but through analyzing and through prepping and through being very mindful, that kind of brings me peace and comfort. And then once I've established that base, then I'm at my best, and I'm free to sort of express myself and express like kind of almost in like in a creative and artistic way. And so I think about the games this year where I think I struck a really nice balance, because I was very dialed in, had all the little details, like, planned to a T that weekend. Yet there were a lot of events where there was this like very strong, you could see it visually and I could feel it, like emotional expression, like there was these really strong celebrations. And it's kind of like this, I can see this look in my eyes when I watch some of the events, like I was like, beast mode or whatever, but there was this very like aggressive feeling. But it sort of started from this like, I laid this groundwork for me where it's like, Brent, like everything's okay. Like you have everything planned, you know exactly what you need to do. You've run through this event in your head, you're perfectly warmed up, like all this stuff is there. So now, you know that you're going to do 5 sets of 3, you know that you're going to break this up this way, and now just let it rip. But it's still within like those rules that I've created, and that strategy that I have, I've memorized it. And so I don't have like, the thruster wall walk workout, I knew how I wanted to break up the thrusters. I knew how I was going to rest on the wall walk. And there was like no fear around, there was no trepidation. There was no resistance to going towards that point of failure, or that point of fatigue, or even like, I think when I do really well, I'm not afraid to look silly. Like I'm not afraid to do something that's embarrassing. And I think that's very, very important in any sport. Probably more important than other sports than in CrossFit, but in something like volleyball or basketball, like in order to play great defense, you need to be willing to look like a fool, right? You need to be willing to, if you play really tenacious defense, you are going to get burned. Like someone's going to dunk on you, like it's going to happen, but you need to be willing to go up there and take the charge. Right. And that's what a good player does. And in volleyball, it's like, you need to dive for every ball. You need to be, on, like you need to have this, visual, like relaxed anxiety where you're like, like your life depends on it. I'm not gonna let that ball hit the floor. And so in CrossFit with that wall walk workout, I was a sweaty mess. And when I'd finished my last wall walk in each set, and I was so exhausted. And I just kind of like crawled up like a swamp monster. Like I didn't care that it didn't look athletic. I just sort of like get onto my elbows and then like take a knee and kind of just do this really like unathletic, unattractive kind of crawl towards the bar, instead of this like trying to like make myself look all proper. And because I'm like, I just didn't care that it like didn't look cool, or it didn't look, a certain way. And when you realize that when you're actually willing to go to that point of like, I don't care what, it looks like, I don't care if I'm sweating and I look like I'm trying, even if I think some people are afraid to truly give 100%, and it appears that they're just dying. And then it's like, that's a 15th place finish. I think for some people that's like embarrassing. And so you'll see some athletes, and you see it, in other sports as well, where they'd rather like kind of look cool and look like they're not trying and come, 17th. It's like, no, you need to be willing to die to come 15th. Right. And like, the best athletes in CrossFit, like they're not afraid to, sprint to the finish line for that extra point between 21st and 20th, in some random workout, second day of competition, as opposed to just jog it in. You need to just be like really aggressive for that. And so like, I have that aggressive mindset, but for me, it needs to start with a plan.
Okay. Well, you said look like a fool. So that leads us to the All In movies.
Yeah.
Who came up with that concept? It was genius. They're some of my favorite things that I've ever watched associated with CrossFit. Laugh all the time.
Yeah. So if those of you who haven't watched it, go watch them. So TELUS is it's like Verizon or, Virgin Mobile or whatever. It's a big, company up here. They do telephones and internet, and they fund like content. And so how did that happen? I had some mutual friends, and this kind of director and a producer made a film about some local hockey team, and then TELUS really liked it. It was a really good piece of media. It was a little series, and they're like, well, we want you to do another one on something. And so they knew me through some friends, and they're like, Brent, let's do a little documentary on you throughout the year and do like a four episode documentary, and cover your 2018 season. And so we did it, and immediately, like, kind of like bouncing some ideas around, and a lot of them were funny. Like they're funny guys, and the hockey one was so serious for them. Like hockey's this, like, there's just no humor in the way that, like, they in those teams and those people they talk to. It's just so, like, hockey is life, and it's like it's life and death. And so I was a lot more open to some humor, and they'd come in with these great ideas, and then we'd kind of hash them out. And yeah, we had a lot of fun filming those. So yeah, like obviously the first bit was I'm like driving through Kelowna and like asking people like, oh, do you know who Brent Fikowski is? Which is me. And oh, no, I don't think so. Or, kind of riff on the fact that in this small CrossFit community, like people know who I am, and I'm like pseudo famous when I walk into a CrossFit box, but everywhere else I'm like not. And then from there, like Pat kind of did the same thing. And then they did a season with Pat. And then they sort of did the final season, which was me, Pat, and a bit of Emily Rolfe as well. And then that one we started with a bit of a very hokey 80s action movie intro, where it was like, coming out of retirement. That was a long time ago, and that whole like MacGruber shtick. So
yeah, the frolicking in the lake. I think I fell off my chair. For you guys to give yourselves up that much for that scene, frolicking in the lake was just hilarious.
Yeah, no, it was a lot of fun. And like, even before that, like I did the open humiliation back in 2015. And I've always had a sense of humor, and I think I just like to entertain. And so, that was an opportunity to and at the time, the open humiliation was kind of a way to, get a little bit of traction on Instagram as well. Like, me and a couple other guys only had a couple hundred followers or 1,000 followers. So kind of like, building a little momentum there and having a bit of fun and a rivalry, because the open, we were all pretty confident we were going to make it through to regionals. So we're like, oh, let's, put a little skin in the game. So
what is your favorite payoff from those bets?
Oh man, there's a video of Nick Urankar when he had some wasabi for losing one of the open ones. That one always cracks me up. And yeah, what were some other good ones, man? There were
who did the poem in the bathtub?
I sang in the bathtub. I know we wrote a song, we wrote a poem for someone. I helped write a poem for Travis Williams, and I should have it made it funnier because his reading of it, like there was this like cadence to it that I wanted him to do, and there was even a line in there that was it was a rip off of like an Eminem song, but like he didn't know that, so his cadence was just all messed up. And so, and like who did a funny one as well? I think Lucas Esslinger did a poem to like CrossFit and Dave and Greg. This was like in 2019, I think. And then like throwing the water balloons at Scally was really funny because we had like this little open announcement. So it wasn't the official CrossFit Open announcement, but Reebok was doing some like activations in Canada. And so it was at this gym, and we all went there, and like Michelle Latonder was there, and Lindy Barber was there when she was still an individual athlete, and then Mitch and Scally me, and then Scally lost, and we were just like whipping these balloons at him in like the middle of winter. It was so bad. He's wearing this Speedo, and we just pelting him with eggs and water balloons in the parking lot. It was so good. So yeah, those are fun times. I don't think we'll do it again this year. It's just like I got so much going on that I haven't even like had we not talked about it, I wouldn't even thought of it. So it's probably not going to happen this year, but those are good times.
It sounds like we have to do it if we should get more followers that way. Maybe we could,
maybe
three of us could do that,
Yeah.
Well, I want to finish up with this off season. In past off seasons, you've done some of the off season competitions. This year, you elected not to. Is that a strategic development?
Yeah, it was intentional for sure. It was just, I think I kind of, there was a moment where I wanted to, And then when the reality of what that would have looked like sunk in, I realized I didn't want to. And so, you know, I hadn't seen a lot of family since with the lockdowns. So that was kind of one thing, lots of lockdowns in Canada. And I'm like, man, I haven't visited my grandparents and I want to spend some quality time with them. And then also just like wanted to get like structurally better at some specific things in training. And when we were talking to my coaches about like how much time we felt we needed to spend on that, it's just like, I'm like, well, if I want to be ready for a Rogue or a Dubai or a Wadapalooza and still spend a bit of this time with family, go on a little vacation with Claire, and then actually like get in some solid, you know, like a 3-week training block, another 3-week training block to work on specific things. We were just kind of like, where does that fit in if I need to also like, you know, for a competition, you just need to be good at everything. And I'm kind of at the point now where, you know, when I show up to compete, you know, like when I go to semis this year, it's like, I want to be the best Brent I've ever been, you know, and if I go to Wadapalooza, like, that's just how I view it. And some people are just kind of like, hey, I'm going to show up, I'm going to do my thing and see where I am. And if I'm not at my best right now, that's cool, you know, but I'll be there for the games. And some people are like that, and that's totally fine. And that's just not how I am anymore. Maybe there was a time where I was like that, but it's like when I show up, I want to be, you know, as good as I've ever been, or like right there or a little better, at least better in like, you know, some categories and maybe a little whatever, right? But I don't know. I just didn't feel like I could bring that package and still work on the things I wanted to work on, so that by the time this season rolled around, I was, you know, I go to semis or I go to the games and I'm like, oh, I am like better at handstand pushups. I am better at chest to bars. I have a better squat. Like those things are like quantified, be better. And like, I didn't feel like I could do that in my training, still be, you know, like at a really elite fitness level to like, you know, podium at those competitions. It just all didn't really line up. Maybe next year, but that's kind of where I was at.
So how does your mind and your body feel after taking that time off? Do you feel more ready to go into the Open and the quarters?
It wasn't time off. I was training hard, but no, I know what you mean though. It's different, right? It's different.
Right.
You know, like the Open and the quarters, like, you know, I'm not expecting them to be, you know, I'm not going to break any records. I know that I'm not going to, I'm probably not going to win the Open, and I'm not going to win quarters. You know, I should do well enough to qualify for semis, and then at semis, I'll be where I need to be. And like, you know, things are trending well, but it's kind of like, you know, I was thinking about this the other day. People talk about, you know, training your weakness and, you know, people talk about training your weaknesses, and they say they want to do that until they see what that actually looks like. And what that usually looks like is you need to take, you know, a step or two back to take 2 to 3 steps forward. Right. And so it's like, if you really, really, really want to, you know, improve your squat, you know, you're going to need to maybe slightly change your technique. And when in doing that, you need to drop the weight for a bit, and then the weight will come back up, and then it'll get better than it was before. But during that, it's like, well, you know, maybe you won't be spending as much time on your running or your rowing or something else. So something else is going to take a hit, and then hopefully you can build that back up. And then, you know, you put 20 pounds on your back squat, and then everything else stayed the same. But throughout that there's these ebbs and flows. And, you know, for me, my goal is, you know, semis and the games. And so, you know, through the Open and quarters, there's going to still be a little bit of a bump in a few of the quantifiable areas of fitness. And, you know, we're aware of that, and it should be not so much that it's you know, a problem for me qualifying, but it also means that I'm, you know, not going to be winning the Open. You know, so it's like, sometimes it's interesting. You'll hear people talk about like, you know, wanting to do those things. And then when you functionally look at those things and what that is going to look like on a day-to-day and a month-to-month basis, there's going to be some moments of the year where you're not as good as you were the month before, in the broad scope of like what is fitness in the CrossFit terms. So like, I joke with people and I say like, oh, I'm, you know, I'm really good at CrossFit like twice a year, you know, at semis and the games, you know, and like, you know, if right now you said, Brent, CrossFit games, like I wouldn't do that well right now. Like I'd be fine, but you know, I wouldn't beat Brent in like the August Brent from 6 months ago. It's like, well, haven't you been training for 6 months? I'm like, yeah, but there's some very specific areas that I would be better at than August Brent, and then I'll catch up in everything else. And then hopefully you'll see a Brent, the year will go by and you'll go, oh, like he's actually, better in every category, or very better in, like 3 categories and the same in the rest, or something like that. That's kind of how I see it. So.
Well, I have no doubt that you have visualized this and analyzed this, how to become the best Brent for this CrossFit
We'll
season.
see. We'll see. I sure hope so. Some days, I'm not gonna lie to you. Some days I have my doubts. It's easy for me to like draw this on the wall here, like Charlie Day, and like this whole, like, there's all these lines and stuff, and like conceptualize it. But it's like, there's definitely moving pieces, and there's some risks taken and stuff. So hopefully it all works out. But we'll see.
Brent, this has been an awesome conversation. I want to thank you so much for joining us. It's been great.
Yeah, no worries, guys. Thanks for having me. I'm glad we bumped into each other.
Yeah.
At Wadapalooza there.
And thanks for the bath bomb.
Did you? Yeah. So I know. I gave you that CBDMD a bath bomb because they gave me one, and I was actually going to use it at my hotel, and I didn't have time. And you can't take that stuff on the plane. You can't take CBD across the border, or else you'll be in trouble. So I was like, it's like, hey. I was like, oh shit. I was just looking for someone wearing nanos. Literally, that was my oh God, sweet.
Man, did I look out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot, Brent, and good luck on this season.
Yeah, thanks guys. Appreciate it.